Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 2 of my March wrap-up. I will link part 1 down below, content warnings, links, all of that. A lot of books, so let's just get into it. I finished The Sea in Winter by Christine Day. This is one of the books for my 12 Books, 12 Friends video that I just did, or TBR I should say, and Annalisa Ely is the one who picked this, and I'm so glad she did, because I've been meaning to read this for a while, and I absolutely loved it. We follow our main character, Maisie, and it's been months since she had a really horrible injury in ballet class, and she can't dance anymore. There might be hope that she could in the future, but for right now, she can't do any of it. She's going to physical therapy and she's, trying to tell people that she's ready, she can go back, and she isn't, and she's really having a hard time with that. And she's having a hard time getting people to understand why this is so important to her, and she also is just having a hard time controlling her emotional reactions to things. She's really upset all of the time. Her family is starting to worry about her, and she just feels like there's nobody who understands what she's going through. Maisie and her family end up going on a vacation together, and this is kind of all bubbling up even more. Maisie is just irritated and upset, and she doesn't always know why, and she's also dealing with the fact that she has lost ballet, something that she loves so much and that is so important to her, and she doesn't know if or when she'll be able to do it again. And as I said, I really loved this. I think Christine Day does an amazing job of balancing these different issues that kids could be going through, and showing that they all matter and they're all important. I thought the family relationships were fantastic. I loved how loving and supportive Maisie's family is, and there are things that they're trying to work out, they're trying to understand where she's coming from, but the conflict of this book is not her parents or her family don't care to understand her, I also felt for Maisie so much as a character. I think this book does a really wonderful job of highlighting different mental health things and how even kids as young as Maisie, or younger even, can be dealing with these things. I think it's so important that kids see that, and so they know that they're not alone. So I really loved this book. All of what I've been talking about would be enough for 5 stars already. I thought it was incredibly well done. The characterization, the story, the themes, and the impact were just fantastic. But then on top of that, I also had a very personal connection and response to this book. Maisie and I have very different experiences, but a lot of what she was going through with ballet felt similar to what I've been having with theater lately. Recently, I had to give up a dream role because the group that I was going to be working with were not willing to take any kind of precautions for the pandemic that we are still in. And I was not willing to put myself and everyone else that I come in contact with at risk. And so because of that, I had to give that up, and it was really hard, and I don't know if or when I'm going to be able to perform again, because this seems pretty standard, and it's really heartbreaking, and it's really difficult to try and explain that to people who aren't involved in performance, and it's something that brings me so much joy, and it makes me feel most myself when I'm acting, when I'm in theater, and to know that I might not be able to do it again, because people who I have worked with for years were not willing to do anything in order to keep me and other people safe. It's just really hard. And so even though me and Maisie have obviously very different experiences, I just really connected to what she was going through, and that it's that grief of losing something that is so important to you and struggling to explain why and not knowing if you'll be able to do it again. I had that personal element of this book as well. So I think you can definitely get a lot out of this even if you don't connect to that part of Maisie's experience. But I just thought this was incredibly well done. I don't know if Christine Day herself has been in performance, but it certainly read like she was. So yeah, as probably we all expected, this book made me cry a lot. Some of it because of the way it dealt with family grief, but also just the loss of something that is so important to us. It was very cathartic though. Anyway, I know they got a little personal, but The Sea in Winter is incredible. I gave it 5 stars. Next, I finished Ravenfall by Kaylin Josephson. This is the first book in what is going to be a series, and we are following our main characters, Annabella and Colin. Annabella is, like, her family run this, like, magical inn, and it's in a town where, like, people kind of know there's magic, but not all of them, and not like completely. It's like a contemporary fantasy, and so her family runs this inn, and this inn ends up getting them involved with a lot of like ghosts or spirits. It's kind of a tourist destination for that, and even though a lot of the tourists don't believe that these ghosts are actually real, they still come to the inn and stay there for like the experience and the excitement and everything. But of course they are real. And then Colin is a boy who his parents were just recently murdered, and his older brother has disappeared, and so he doesn't really know where to go. He doesn't even know why his parents were killed. He just knows it has something to do with a supernatural creature, or like the supernatural world or magic. And so he ends up finding himself at the inn, the Ravenfall Inn, and he and Annabella end up teaming up to try and figure out what is going on, like to figure out who killed Colin's parents, and trying to prevent the veil to the other world from being torn open, because it seems like that is becoming more and more likely, and that would be very bad for everybody. Like all these like spirits and monsters could like come through and hurt people and cause havoc. So this was a really interesting concept, and I really appreciated that it dealt with the like emotional cost of some of these things. Like Colin seeing his parents murdered in front of him, that is something that like gives him a lot of trauma, understandably, and that is treated in a way that felt realistic. Like sometimes in books, you know, like the story starts off with this really traumatic thing happening, but then everyone kind of gets caught up in the adventure and they don't really think about it much. That didn't happen here. Colin is grieving the whole book, and he is like struggling the whole book with seeing this horrible thing happen. And it's weird to say like I liked that or I appreciated that, but it felt realistic to me. I also really liked the themes of home and belonging, and I think some of the magic elements were fun. Annabella doesn't really have magic the way the rest of her family does, and so we see her struggling with that a little bit. But I kind of was disappointed in this book overall. For one thing, I just found the story kind of boring. Like I don't know, I wasn't super grabbed by the plot, and I also think like some of the plot developments later felt very out of nowhere in a way. Like so there are some elements of Celtic mythology in this book which I would have thought I would really like, but the way they were like put into the story at the end just felt very odd to me. And I liked our two main characters, but I wanted more from them, or I wanted more from their friendship. And I also feel like we weren't always given like good reasoning for why characters did the things they did, except that like the plot demanded it. So I didn't like that either. So I was just pretty underwhelmed by this one, which is really sad because I thought I was going to really enjoy it. I gave Ravenfall 3 stars, but did the ending still make me tear up? Yes, it did. So, I don't know. It was okay. I just wanted to like it more than I did. Next, I finished The Pale Lady by Alexandre Dumas. I don't know who the translator is, but it's pretty much the only edition that you can find, I feel like. So, it's one that looks like this, if you can see that cover. And this is a very short story that is Alexandre Dumas' vampire story, which was one of my picks for our Past Classics book club. I don't know if we have that scheduled or if the live show has already happened by the time this video goes up, but I will link that down below. Yeah, I will be running the discussion for this, and I won't get into too many details because we still have to do the discussion, but I wasn't a fan, unfortunately. It's about this young woman who ends up being loved by 2 different brothers, and there's like some vampire lore as well. I just didn't care for this. I felt kind of icked out by like the focus on like bloodlines and like, I don't know, ethnicity and all of that. Like it just felt kind of uncomfortable. I also found the story itself and the romance really lackluster, and I think the ending was just like kind of weird, not super satisfying. So I didn't have a great time with this, unfortunately. I gave The Pale Lady 2 stars, but it was interesting to read a like classic vampire story that I hadn't heard of before, that isn't super well known. Then I read a couple more really wonderful picture books. One is The Proudest Blue by Olympic medalist Ibtihaj Muhammad with S.K. Ali, art by Hatam Ali. The subtitle is A Story of Hijab and Family. And this is about a young girl who is watching her older sister start wearing hijab, and what that means for her and what that means for their family, and just like it's a really beautiful story. Ibtihaj Muhammad is the first, I think, Olympic medalist who wore hijab, or who wears hijab, and she worked on this picture book, and I thought it was really lovely. The art is just like really warm and wonderful and lovely, and it's just a really beautiful story about family and love and belonging and acceptance, and it's just, yeah, really wonderful. I gave The Proudest Blue 5 stars. Then I read Standing in the Need of Prayer, a modern retelling of the classic spiritual, written by Carol Boston Weatherford and illustrated by Frank Morrison. Look at this cover. I know I keep saying I love the art, but I really, really love this art. Like, I don't know how to describe the style, but it fits the story so well. And this book deals with the treatment of African Americans in the US, including slavery and the civil rights era, and it's a story, this picture book is a lot about like resilience and justice, without like overshadowing all of the harm. This is an absolutely beautiful book. One tiny drawback is I feel like for some of the text, and maybe this was at the back of the book, I can't remember, but there's like some more like nonfiction kind of information about the different things pictured in this book, and I really appreciated that. But there were like a couple of points where I feel like the language was just softened a little too much, and this is obviously intended for young children, so that might be why, but just like when it's describing, you know, like what slavery was and that kind of thing, most of the book I feel like did not soften the language, but there were a couple of parts that did, and I don't know, that stood out to me. But overall, I would absolutely recommend this. I really loved it, and I gave Standing in the Need of Prayer 5 stars as well. I'm telling you guys, it was a really fantastic month for picture books. Next, I finished Ms. Marvel Volume 1, No Normal, by G. Willow Wilson, and who is the artist? Adrian Alfona. Color artist is Ian Herring. And yeah, this is Volume 1 of a... I don't read comics, so I don't know how to describe this. I don't know if this is like a reboot. I don't know if this is still considered canon. I don't know. But it's about a girl named Kamala, who is the new Ms. Marvel. And I ended up enjoying this so much more than I thought, because, like, the reasons I didn't know if I would like this is because I have read a full-length novel by G. Willow Wilson before that I really, really didn't like, but I wanted to give her another chance. And then also, I didn't care for the writing style very much at all. Or, sorry, not writing style, art style, especially the way that, like, figures and characters were drawn. I really didn't like that. But I think this is the first time that I have not liked the art of a graphic novel and still given it 4 stars, because I enjoyed the story and the characters so much. I really loved Kamala as a protagonist, and I really loved seeing her realize that the reason she wants to use her superpowers is to do good and to help people, and to, like, it made it feel very personal, and I really liked that. I also thought the family and like friendship relationships were so complex and so interesting. Besides the art, the other thing I didn't really care for was like the inventor plotline, which is arguably like the main point of the story, because that's like the conflict and like the villain that Kamala is going to be facing. So I didn't care about that. Like, I was just really here for Kamala herself and like the different characters, like the people she has around her. But I really enjoyed this. I gave Ms. Marvel Volume 1 4 stars, and I'm actually planning to continue the series at some point, which, as I said, I did not know that I would. Next, I finished How to Be a Woman Online, Surviving Abuse and Harassment and How to Fight Back by Nina Jankowicz. This is a very short nonfiction book that I talked about briefly before. I've mentioned that my mom is a big NPR listener. One of her love languages is sending people NPR links or like stories, which I just love. I think that's really sweet. And she actually had heard about, like, she heard the author talking in an interview on NPR, and she knows that I do booktube, and so she got me this book about being a woman on the internet and what that's like, and just how to take care of yourself as much as possible, even though we shouldn't have to do that. But I thought this was fantastic. Like, I felt like the advice was like very clear and actionable things, but I also think that the analysis in this book was so well done. Like the way that the author like talks about misogyny online and how that intersects with other prejudices and identities. Like, I really appreciated how intersectional this book is, because I've talked before about books that kind of have this idea or concept and they don't always feel super intersectional or like knowledgeable about the fact that like the experience for women of color is different, or for queer women is different, or for gender non-conforming people. So I just really, really loved that the author very explicitly talks about those things, and she has women who do know these things. So like when she's talking about the misogyny faced by women of color, she actually has a Black woman like speak for herself, and like she has a section from her in the book, which I've mentioned before. I wish more authors would do that, so I really, really loved that and appreciated that. And it's also just a very validating book to like read. Like, it's awful, obviously. There are parts of this book that are just infuriating and upsetting to read, but I think it's so important that this book is out there. I think it's something that anybody should read, really, because it'll either resonate with you or it'll give you a perspective on how other people have to navigate the world, and they shouldn't have to do this. And yeah, it's just a very validating thing to see this talked about as the serious issue it is. And as I said, I thought the advice and the information was really useful and really helpful. And even though, as I said, there are parts of this book that are just infuriating, I do think there is actually a lot of like solidarity and confidence and like hope in this book, because it also talks about like finding community, you know, like connecting with other women, and how that's a really wonderful part of being online. So yeah, I just thought this was great. I gave How to Be a Woman Online 5 stars. Next, I finished Women of Myth, From Dear Woman and Mamiwata to Amaterasu and Athena, Your Guide to the Amazing and Diverse Women from World Mythology, by Jenny Williamson and Jen McMenemy, creators of the Ancient History Fangirl podcast, illustrated by Sarah Richard, with a foreword by Liv Albert. I know that was a mouthful. I basically just read you the entire front cover, but this is a book about, obviously, women from mythologies and belief systems all over the world, and I really enjoyed this. I have read quite a few of this kind of book at this point, and I never get tired of it. The art, of course, is gorgeous. I really love the variety of women, and I really appreciated the introduction where the authors talk about how, like, using the words like mythology and like legends and all of that, they're not making a judgment on the value or the reality of these goddesses and these belief systems. They're using it in like the scholarly sense of like mythology meaning like a set of beliefs. And they, like, I just really like that they acknowledge that like several of these goddesses are from actively practiced religions, you know, like they're not just like fun, interesting things for like Westerners to read about, you know, like these are important parts of people's religion and practices, and I wish more of these books did that kind of thing, but I really love that they did here. As I said, I thought the art was gorgeous. I learned some things from this book that I didn't know before, which is, you know, always nice, and I liked how they connected, like I liked how they shared some of the like historical information about these different women and goddesses. Like I think it was Ishtar is one of the goddesses where the priestesses in her temple, a lot of them were trans women, and talking about like how that happened and why that was, and just I really appreciated learning about how the past was often a lot more complex and intersectional than some historians or scholars would have us believe. A couple of things I didn't like so much is I feel like there was a lot of vagueness around some of the examples they were using, or like the way that the authors would refer to one version of the story says this instead, or they would mention multiple versions of a story but then only pick and fixate on one and not really explain why that was the one they chose, you know, like if it was one that, if it was like a regional difference, you know, or if it was, if these interpretations like occurred in like equal numbers, or if maybe this was the interpretation that more people believed, or this is the interpretation we have more information about. Like, I don't know. I know that this is a, you know, very short form, like information, so maybe it's understandable that they didn't have a lot of like background details like that, but I just would appreciate if they're going to bring up and talk about specifics, then they should be specific, you know? And then also there were some parts where it felt like the authors were trying to like make these narratives fit into a more like modern view of like feminism or something, at the expense of these figures' like identity and these actual beliefs. Like, for example, when they're talking about Artemis, who is very famously one of the Greek goddesses who did not have romantic or sexual relationships or partners, they allude to her close friendships with some of her huntresses and are like, does that mean she was a lesbian? Maybe, we don't know, in a way that kind of hinted that that could have been the case or was probably the case. And it's just something where, like, obviously sapphic relationships are important to talk about, but like, why would you do that at the expense of a figure who was, you know, asexual or aromantic? Like, if we would use modern language for that. I don't know. So just things like that that felt a little weird. Just like things where it felt like they were maybe interpreting to the point where they were like overstepping. I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but overall I did really enjoy this. I thought there was some great information. I really liked reading it. Art is gorgeous, and I gave Women of Myth 4 stars. Next, I finished Poppy's Peril by Alison Thibault. This is the third novella in the the Tales of Ambia series. It's very short. We're following our main character Poppy, who we know from the second book, and this is basically like her story leading up to that second book. And unfortunately this was my, I think, least favorite in the series so far. Like, it wasn't awful. I enjoyed the writing, I liked the world, I liked Poppy as a main character, but I really don't feel like this added anything to the story. I didn't enjoy the plot, and like sometimes happens with like royalty stories, I feel like, again, the way that like bloodlines and like inheritance and like that kind of thing was talked about didn't really sit well with me. Like, there are fantasies that have royal families that don't do that, and this one did, and I just didn't really care for that. So yeah, I think I give this like a 3-star, 3 or 3.5. Like, there were things I liked about it, but I don't think it added a lot, and it wasn't my favorite. I was gonna try and talk about like more books for this section, but I think I'm gonna need to stop. So the last one I'm gonna talk about today is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire. This is the third book in the Wayward Children series, which is a series of companion novels that are portal fantasies about kids who find their way back from their portal world and the difficulty they have adjusting to the normal world. And this is one of the ones that takes place primarily in one of those portal worlds, and I loved this. Like, I was expecting to enjoy it, but I really, really loved it. Like, this is a great reminder for me that I can really enjoy the way Shauna Maguire writes like whimsy, because as I was talking about with the Over the Woodward Wall series, that one isn't quite hitting for me, but this one really did. I think this is my favorite in the series so far. I thought the world was interesting. I thought the overall story was really compelling. I loved our main character of this one, which it kind of frustrates me that like her name isn't in the synopsis. It's about a different character, Cora. I adored Cora, who is plus sized, and her world is like a mermaid world, and just like the idea of a fat mermaid and the way that is talked about here is just so cool. I enjoyed the world building. I really loved some of the supporting characters. Kate is one of my favorites, and I loved that he was in here so much. Personally, I found Rinny a little annoying. She's kind of like the most important supporting character. Like, she's the one who kind of sets all of these other characters off on their quest. I found her kind of obnoxious at the beginning, but she really grew on me by the end. And I think the ending itself was really interesting. And I know that some people feel like these aren't long enough, like these are novellas, and that there's not enough time to develop things. I personally feel like this series is like that Shauna Maguire is doing a great job of like using her page time well. So that really worked for me here as well. Something else that is interesting is we get glimpses of some of the other characters and their worlds, or we hear them talk about what their worlds were like. And like, there are always these like these things that, these places that are not perfect, but they're perfect for them, you know? And there are like some of these places we hear about where it's like, that actually does not at all sound good or peaceful or happy, or like something that would be desirable. But then I realized like, that's kind of the point. That's like one of the points of this series, is that all of these kids have found themselves in a world that they are perfectly suited to, and that's something that other people aren't going to connect with in the same way. So I thought that was kind of clever or interesting. But yeah, I love this. I gave Beneath the Sugar Sky 5 stars. Okay, everybody, so that was the second group of books. We have one more wrap up. I'm sorry that there was so much. I read a lot in March, and even though a lot of the things were short, I still have thoughts on them, obviously. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!